That the order is in the part of the Allon series where he is the chief of the office. And I wanted to create a story that actually was not, that didn't have an office beginning. And so I created a scenario where, you know, it's been years, so let's take a vacation. And so Kiara's figuring out, well, where can they go on vacation and have a little fun and relax? And so they go back to Venice on for a little bit of a holiday. And His Holiness, his Gabriel's friend, the Pope, dies. And I had obviously this narrow window between the Pope's death and the conclave and the election of a new Pope to try to fit a thriller into what in a vacation. That's why I wrote the novel the way I did. And the best part of the novel is that its surprise ending and the shocking ending of the conclave, and Archbishop Luigi Donati, the Pope's private secretary, is elected the new Pope with Gabriel's help. I love the ending of that book where Gabriel sees his old friend standing on the balcony above the entrance of St. Peter's, and all dressed in white. I just love the end of that book. The Cellist is it explores how the Russians and Vladimir Putin determined early on that they were going to use money as a weapon to corrupt and undermine Western democracy and the Western financial system. And that's what that book is all about. And then it sort of overlapped with our own political crisis here in around the 2020 election. It was a very important novel in the series, and I love that character. I love the cellist Isabel Brenner. What is the magic of inventing a character? I mean, I like to close my eyes. I just sit and listen to them speak, how they look, how they feel. I build up in my head every element that I can of a major character's life, knowing that only a few fragments are ever going to make it onto the page. And the challenge is how to create them and present them in a way that they pop. I mean, I take time in the way I introduce a character. I want them to, an important character, to really explode when they come on the page, not literally, of course, unless they're a suicide bomber. So I use tricks like, seeing people through other eyes, what other people say about this character. I have all kinds of little tricks that I use to get a sense of what a character is really like without larding down the story with too much backstory. And we all, it's like, we don't want to sit through and read someone's resume. And that's a challenge. I play around with point of view and voice. I mean, I think it's fair to say that and I've never written in the first person, and I don't have anything against it. I love the first person, but it doesn't work for me. Okay, I am the voice of the books, and sometimes I will pull out and use an omniscient point of view and then spiral back in. And the use of a handful of passages that are omniscient, all seeing, where I can do several things at once in a very limited amount of time, hopefully with a little bit of grace and humor. I try to make the writing lively. Even when I'm talking about serious events, I try to make it lively and interesting, so that it's not just the facts, but the way I'm presenting it is also interesting. I didn't know if it's my absolute reverence for The Great Gatsby, but as I say to my wife all the time, there's hardly a single wasted sentence in that book. There's not a throwaway line in The Great Gatsby. And that's the way I try to approach it. You know, try not to have the phone rang, quote, hello, question mark, unquote. I don't write those kinds of things. And so, using going up into the heavens, looking down is a way that I try to impart information when I need it, and done deftly and quickly. Well, I always want to know how the book's going to end. Okay, I don't always know exactly. Like Portrait of an Unknown Woman, it has a big twist at the end about who the actual forger is. So I knew, obviously, who the actual forger was. And I knew how the antagonist, Philip Somerset, was going to meet his end and who was going to kill him. But just maneuvering everyone into place. That was a different book. That book is a book I always wanted to write. Gabriel's, this book is more typical, where something that begins in the art world doesn't necessarily stay in the art world. That's the first book where I ever wrote that it actually stayed in the art world from beginning to end. It was an art book. It was about forgery and financial fraud in the art world, and it stayed in the art world. And so the ending was a lot different than the final third of the book was much different than most of my books. But look, the writing the chase and at the ending is very exciting. But for me, and I think it comes to in this, that I do try to make, this is weird, but I try to make it beautiful and poetic and not just violent. That's the way I go about it. Fading to black is an interesting technique, not necessarily showing it. The last paragraph of the climactic sequence in this book is, I don't want to spoil it, but a major character dies horribly in Moscow. And it's actually written from the point of view of the character after he's dead. He was shot, dozens of times, and I did it beautifully rather than violently. And so I guess I'm looking at the British edition, but the last two paragraphs of chapter 59 in this novel is an example of that, how to write something violent without having it violent. So sometimes it does. Collector is just one that has been in the back of my mind for a long time. And I stayed away from it because of the John Fowles book. And I just didn't think I could use it. And it just was so perfect for this one. And so the way I gave myself permission is I included an homage in the epigraph to the Collector. And because there's a line in the Collector that fits perfectly for this novel. We all want things we can't have. Being a decent human being is accepting that. John Fowles, the Collector. And so I finally figured out a way to use the title, which is has obvious art world implications, without treading on one of the classic books ever written. Every so-called rule, every single day. I hate convention. I avoid convention. In the first chapter of this book, there's someone who's murdered horribly. Well, I don't show the murder. I show him being discovered by the housekeeper. And I break the rules all the time. So that's the one thing I would say. The other piece of advice I would give is just, unless you're someone who knows you've got this, that you're going to sell this piece of work. If you're writing it speculatively, just try to have fun. That's the best. Enjoy it. because if you do it for a living, it does. Have tried very hard to not make it seem like a job, but it does become your job. So just enjoy that first book, writing that first book.